There have been so many changes from Anthropic recently, it's been hard to keep up with them. Some of them are huge, like design, and of course we got a new Opus model. But in the middle of all those big announcements, some of the smaller, really useful changes have kind of slipped through the cracks. But before I had a chance to do a video about those small tips that I wanted to share, around the time that the new Opus model came out, I noticed that my Claude Code was behaving very differently, like catastrophically different. Okay, maybe catastrophic is too strong of a word, but it had gone seemingly overnight from the world's most friendly, helpful, useful assistant to an overworked, underpaid, slightly irritated assistant, where I used to ask for a task and get back, here you go, here's what's changed, here's a list of the things that need to happen next, and a list of considerations, things for you to think about. Suddenly, I was getting back bullet points. Sentence fragments. Done, changed. Do you want A or B? I'll be over there when you make up your mind. And I will tell you, after several iterations of this, of asking like 3 times, what does that mean? What are you even asking me? I finally just typed into Claude, explain this to me like I'm 12. I don't know what you're talking about. I was trying to use Claude Code as usual, but suddenly it was making me feel kind of stupid. Okay, I know it can't make me feel any kind of way, but it was reaching into my soul and pulling out my own insecurities and frustrations when I couldn't figure out what it was doing. In short, it started feeling like Codex to me. If you've watched me for any length of time at all, you know I have said over and over how much I love Claude Code, and most of the reason is because it meets me at the level where I'm at. That's the version of Claude Code I had come to know and love and had now seemingly left the building. And then right around the time I was really starting to lose my mind, Anthropic came right out and said, oh yeah, we've had some problems lately. We had a couple of bugs, and one of the things that we did in order to save tokens was we turned down the output verbosity. Now, I'm all in favor of that. Saving tokens is good, but this was starting to feel kind of unworkable to me. So this video was going to be about a few of the smaller commands that I've come across recently that have really made my day-to-day usage feel much more comfortable. But before I could even get to those, I really had to fix this interaction problem. And the solution was such a relief that I just had to share it in case anyone else is experiencing the same problems that I had. So if you haven't been noticing that, feel free to skip ahead and just get to the quick little wins. But if you've been seeing the same kind of quiet quitting on Claude Code's part that I have, stick around for this next part. So here's what I tried first, because some of you might have seen the same thing and tried it. If you go into /config settings and scroll down, you'll notice there is this thing called verbose output. So I figured my problem is that I'm getting a terse output, so I want it to be more verbose. Give that a shot, but that didn't really change anything. So I did what I should have done in the first place. I asked Claude. What Claude told me is that that verbose output is for the transcript that happens along the way. As Claude is doing its work, that setting will show you more or less of that information along the way, but it doesn't change the overall feel of Claude, and it certainly doesn't add that nice summary at the end that I was really looking for. But then Claude went on to say the magic words. What you're actually looking for is the output style. What you might want is called explanatory. And at that, I had to do a full Scooby-Doo style double take. What? Over in Claude Chat, you can select what style to use, and I had been using explanatory for quite some time. This, to me, was the right mode. It would explain things and use analogies and give me a fuller picture of what I was coming in for. But I had literally no idea I could use that same style in Claude Code. So you can see I do have it set up now in my Claude Code system, and one of the artifacts that I do think is new is this insight block. It's kind of this section at the end of a task that will highlight the things that have happened and really call out key pieces of information. So in order to set this up in your config settings, if you scroll down to Output Style and hit the right arrow, it'll bring up a list of your options. So mine had been on default and I changed it to Explanatory. Hit enter and enter again to get out of there. Now, there's one thing to make note of. When you do that in a project, it does seem to change it only for the project level settings. So if you want to change it across all of your projects, then you'll want to change it at the user level. When I was making the change, I told Claude I wanted it to make that change at a user level instead of just the project level, and it took care of it for me. And one more little thing, once you make that change, you might have to exit out of your session and come back in order for that change to take effect. So I have to tell you, just doing that has been a game changer for me. I will say it's not exactly back to my previous Claude Code experience that I was used to. I'm not really sure what happened, but I do know it was a physically palpable change in experience with Claude Code, and it actually made me think about switching to a different model. I'm really happy to have it back. So if you're like me and Claude Code has been feeling weirdly standoffish to you lately, give that a shot, see if it helps you out. So now we can get on to the things that I actually came in here to talk about. All right, so this next tip is auto mode. It does come with a small caveat, but stay with me because it still might pertain to you. So you probably already know about the two ends of the Claude permission spectrum. You can either start up Claude Code and it has basically no permissions. You have to hit yes, allow to every single thing that it does. The other end of the spectrum is to use YOLO mode or dangerously skip permissions, and then it will just do everything for you. While the first one is a little bit tedious, that's the one that I generally use because danger's right in the name of the second one, and I don't know, that just didn't seem like a good idea. But finally, Anthropic has offered us a middle ground. It's called auto mode. This one will auto approve things that it deems safe, but still ask you for permission for things that are a little bit riskier. Now, you might have already heard this announcement. It did come out about a month ago, but it was only available at the enterprise level. However, a couple of weeks ago, I noticed that they had quietly started rolling it out to people on the Max plan. It's not yet available for pro users, but given Anthropic's previous track record of slowly rolling out things to make sure that they work, it is still an experiment. My best guess is that this will be rolling out to pro users in the near future. So if you want to start up Claude using auto mode, you just type Claude and you use the enable auto mode option. The other way you can enable it, if you don't start Claude from a command line, you can hit Shift Tab to cycle through, accept edits, plan mode, auto mode, and just select it that way. So hopefully, if you don't have access to this yet, you will soon. My next favorite little tip, I've actually talked about in the past when I covered remote control, and it is the /rename command. If you've got more than one session going on and you've ever tried to use remote control, you know that Claude just assigns random names to your sessions. Valiant Pearl, Zippy Waterfall. Yeah, these are not helpful to me when I'm looking for something specific that I'm doing. Because I can now work in auto mode, I don't have to stand at my terminal and just keep babysitting and keep hitting accept. Now I can just kind of set Claude off on a task and walk away and go do something else. However, because it does still ask for permission for a few things, I will very often come back an hour later and find that it is waiting on my permission to continue its work. So I've started using remote control on my phone a lot more often while I'm away from my desk. And so that's where this one comes in, rename. I want to rename this session to something I can find on my phone later. So this is my fitness app. So I want to rename it to fitness app. And you can see that right here. So now when I go into remote control on my phone, I'm going to be able to figure out which session is which. I know it's a small one, but I have found this one to be genuinely helpful and worth repeating. Okay, the last one. And this is one that sort of solved one of my biggest sort of workflow headaches. I use Claude Code a lot for brainstorming and documentation. almost really more for that than I do for coding, to be honest. I have a whole separate subdirectory where I work with Claude Code to create documents and plans for the future and do a bunch of brainstorming. Recently, I've been working on putting together a kind of little benchmark system for myself. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today, but long story short, I just thought it would be kind of fun to work with Claude to build my own set of benchmark tests to see where these new models would fit into my own workflow and my own needs. So I brainstormed with Claude in my brainstorming directory, and I got to the point where we had a pretty solid plan, and I wanted it to actually start building the code for me. But now I had a problem. I had all this information and context in my brainstorming directory, but I wanted to build the benchmarking system somewhere else in a clean new project. So how to reach over from this directory to that new one? With add directory. So this just lets the current project that I'm in reach into another directory and work over there as well. So now instead of the weird copy paste, hope I can maintain the context across two sessions, I can just have one project and Claude can reach into my coding directory and build everything right there. From the brainstorming session, I can ask it to build out the code, test it, I can ask it to create a Git repo, push it up to GitHub, everything that you would expect, but I can keep that coding directory clean and only have the things in it that I want to maintain going forward. I'm hoping to be able to pull this out and run it again and again as new models come out. I don't want to clutter it up with all of my sort of brainstorming and half-finished thoughts and initial designs. And I've ended up using this a lot more than I even expected I would. It's really nice to be able to point your current project over at like an old project that maybe had a design template that you want it to use and say, hey, go take a look over there and use that as a springboard. You can also use it to say, hey, go take a look at this project. I want to do something slightly different, but I don't want to destroy that one in the process. Let's recreate something similar but different in this directory. So that add directory command has been around for a while, but I have found it to be invaluable. It's really solved a lot of problems for me. So those are my small but mighty tips. The big stuff has been really exciting recently, but sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest impact on a day-to-day basis. So I'm curious to hear what's on your list. What's the little thing that you've maybe come across recently and thought, oh, I can't believe I've been living without that all this time? That's the stuff I love hearing about. It's not always about the big headline features. Sometimes it's just about somebody saying, oh, you gotta try this thing that I just came across. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.